And it came to pass that a family was going to Disneyland. There had been a lot of conversation about the trip. The kids were very eager and very excited. The day came early in the morning. Everybody got all that they were going to take together and into the car. Snacks were packed. Kids were packed. It was a tight squeeze, but everything was in the car. They were about to start the car and pull out of the driveway when Mom said, "Just a minute, Dad," and turned around and said to the children, "There's going to be no whining or complaining or arguing or fighting or any of the other kinds of things that too often happen. Is that clear?" All the heads nodded. Do you understand what I'm saying? The heads nodded. In fact, if there is any of that, if you start whining and complaining and fighting and pushing and shoving, we're going to turn the car around and we're going to come back home. Do you understand that? All the heads nodded. Okay, we're ready. Car started and off they went to the happiest place on earth. Unfortunately, the trip was not the happiest trip on earth. In fact, even before they got out of the city limit, it started. Well, he's on my side. Well, she kicked me. Well, stop hitting me. And whap, bang, crying. And the car turned around and back home they headed. The kids' eyes got that big. They started to beg and plead and to cry. Mom and Dad didn't say a word. They drove back into the garage. They got out of the car. They unloaded. The kids began to scream and plead and beg. And Mom turned and looked at them and said, "If you stop your screaming and pleading and begging, we may go next week." So the kids, crestfallen, went into the house and slowly climbed the stairs to their room. As soon as they were out of sight, Mom and Dad high-fived. You see, the tickets to Disneyland were for next week. They always had been. Now, I realize that some of you are thinking about parental ethics. And I understand, those are legitimate questions. I don't want to demean them. I do remember something that someone once said about being, wise as serpents, harmless as doves. What interests me is not so much the parental ethics in that story. What interests me is how it affects the children. Because you see, I want to talk today about something called character. Character. If you go to the dictionary and open the dictionary and look up the word character, it will say something like this. It will say that character is the collection of different traits and characteristics of a person's mental or moral making. In fact, some definitions will simply say that character is a person's moral makeup, who they are as a moral individual. That's character. We can probably all agree with that definition. In fact, we can probably all agree that character is an exceedingly important part of raising our children. Just in case you want something further on that, I'd like to ask you to listen to the words of the Christian psychologists John Townsend and Henry Cloud. Here's how they write about character. A person's character, they write, largely determines how they will function in life. In a world that has begun to explain away people's behavior with a variety of excuses, people are left wondering why their lives do not work. This next sentence, they place in italics. Most of our problems result from our own character weakness. Where we possess inner strength, we succeed, often in spite of tough circumstances. But where we do not possess inner strength, we either get stuck or fail. If a relationship requires understanding and forgiveness and we do not have that character quality, the relationship will not make it. If a difficult time period in work requires patience and delay of gratification and we do not possess those traits, we will fail. Character is almost everything. If a person's character makeup determines their future, then child rearing is primarily about helping children to develop character that will take them through life safely, securely, productively, and joyfully. Parents and those who work with children, would do well to keep this in mind. A major goal of raising children is to help them develop the character that will make their future go well. Well, I suppose if we run that statement up the flagpole, most of us will salute. We can agree with that. We can say, yes, I understand that character is just that important. I think the question we might have is, well, how exactly do we develop that character in our children? How do we do that? That's really the question. Well, to start off with an answer, I want to go to the book of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 22. I want to go to what is undoubtedly the most often quoted, the most often read statement on parenting in the Bible. It's very brief, it's very short. Don't blink or you'll miss it. It's a very brief text. It's one proverb, one verse long. It comes right in the heart, right in the context of a whole grouping of proverbs that are encouraging people to live godly lives. In that context, this is what the old wise man wrote. Proverbs 22, verse 6. Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. Start children off in the way they should go. And even when they're old, they will not turn from it. Now, when we read this text, we immediately think of very young children, and understandably so. They're getting a start in life. The text says, start children off in the way they should go. It says children. We think of young children. There are other translations. Train a child in the way he should go, she should go, etc. It might be of interest to note that even though the wording of the text makes us think of young children, the Talmud, that important collection of rabbinic sayings, the Talmud thinks of this more in lines of children about 16 to 24 years of age. Not just starting out in life, but starting out in adult life. And so it's possible that the writer of this proverb has a much wider range of children in mind that we might first think of when we read it. What is it saying? What does it tell us about helping our children develop character? Well, one thing is very clear just from a simple reading of the text, and that is it's saying, parent, whatever it is that you do now is going to have results later. That part we cannot miss. The ways in which you interact with them, the ways in which you lead and guide and discipline and love, and all of those things have long-reaching results and consequences. But does it tell us anything about parenting? Especially to those who think, well, my parenting years are past. I think I may have blown it. If you're in that position, if you think my parenting years are past, there's nothing I can do now, then please just remember a couple of things. First of all, remember this. Parenting is a key ingredient of a child's life. There is no way to escape that reality. That's absolutely true. However, it is one ingredient. It is one factor. Children grow up and then they make their decisions. In fact, good parents can sometimes have very rebellious kids. See God and Adam and Eve, for an example. Pretty decent parenting, pretty sad choices. On the other hand, you can have parents that aren't that good and end up with some very good kids. See King Saul and his son Jonathan. So if you're a parent and you feel either pride or embarrassment, don't take all the praise on yourself. Don't take all the guilt on yourself. It's a mixed bag, a mixed reality. But we still have the question. How do we help our children develop character? In this series, Lessons I Think I've Learned as a Parent, each week, the lesson I share came to me from someone else in the process of parenting in our earlier years. Last week, the lesson of tomorrow came to me from none other than my beloved, Ms. Anita herself. When she looked at me over Miranda's head and when Miranda left the room, asked me the question, what are you going to do when she's 15? That was a moment a light went on in my mind, the lesson of tomorrow. Well, for today's sermon, the lesson of character. The lesson of character came home to me in two words. Just 2 words. 2 words that came to me through the writing and the speaking of Christian psychologists John Townsend and Henry Cloud. 2 words. The lesson of character. What are the 2 words? Empathy and reality. Empathy and reality. I think if you take those 2 words and you mix them in the thinking of the proverb that we have just read, it causes a lesson to emerge that is a lesson we parents ought not miss. It's a lesson of character. Here's how I might state it. Start kids off in the place where love sustains them and reality confronts them. And one day they will be people of character. Start kids off in the place where love sustains them and reality confronts them. And one day they will be people of character. So let's talk about those 2 words. Let's start with the first one, empathy. What is empathy? Empathy is that act of seeing life, seeing a situation, seeing a circumstance from the viewpoint and the perspective and the life of another person. It means that I enter into their experience. I stand in their shoes. I inhabit their skin. I feel with their heart. I see through their eyes. I understand the experience and just how it is that it affects them. What is it as a parent? It means that I remember that once upon a time I was 8 years old and 12 years old and 18 years old. It means that I remember an adult world where sometimes things were threatening, where I blew it, where I messed up, where things didn't go as I planned, where I didn't think. It means that I remember that. And when I face my child in any of those kinds of circumstances, I move into their space, see it through their eyes, feel it through their heart, think of it in their social circumstance. Recognize that for dad to walk on the school grounds dressed like that, for mom to wear that to the school party, it's social suicide. Recognize that. Experience life through their eyes. Empathy. The late Jess Lair, the university professor, writer, and speaker, defined empathy this way. He said, empathy is your pain in my heart. Just that. Empathy is your pain in my heart. Last week I spoke of the hypothetical situation, maybe real. The hypothetical situation of the mom in the grocery store checkout line and the kids who held a riot right there and walked out clutching the candy. One of you wrote to me this week, wrote to me about that specific situation. When you wrote to me, here's what you said. Our son Luke just related a similar incident at Target this last week. But instead of silently gazing at the mom, he spent the time in line making crazy, funny faces at the kids to distract them. And this is what he's done for years. Don't shame an overwhelmed parent. Do something. Do something. That's empathy. Empathy is that experience that places you in the other person's skin and understands life from their perspective. When I was in college, we had a teacher in one class that told us one day about something important from his life. He had worked for a period of time before becoming a college professor as an EMT with an ambulance crew. And he told us about the realities of what it was like to work in such a profession. He described some of the scenes, going to some of the most horrific accident scenes and the blood and the carnage that was left behind. He spoke of people having home accidents or crime scenes and going there and the devastation. He said, the way I emotionally survived that was that I began to harden my heart. It just got harder inside. Didn't feel as much compassion for people. And then he said, I went home to my kids. And my kids would come running to me. They'd fall and scrape their knee. Come running, Daddy, 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 it hurts. Or they'd come running holding the side of their face, Daddy, 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 a bee stung me. And he said I would look at that and it was nothing. And I'd say to them, that's nothing. Stop your crying. Go back and play. Impatient and angry with him. And he said, then one day I woke up to the reality that I was losing my kids. When I realized that I was losing them, when I realized that the lack of empathy from me was causing them to increasingly distance, I quit my job. I found another profession, another career. Because he didn't say it this way, but because he said, I wasn't manifesting the kind of love that sustains, the kind of empathy that enters into and cares for our children. I still remember one day when this lesson was really rolling around in my mind. Austin was already, I would suspect, early teen years, somewhere along in there. I honestly don't remember exactly what he had done, but it was something that was upsetting, and he ought not to have done. I was upset about it. Been out of shape with it. I drove him to school, Loma Linda Academy, and pulled into the drop-off lane. He was about to get out, and I thought, I can't just leave this hanging in the air. And I'm thinking about this reality, and I think about this concept of connection and intimacy and empathy. So I said, Austin, you know I'm upset, don't you? He said, yeah, Daddy, I do. I said, you know that's not something that you should have done. He said, I know. I said, Austin, do you understand how much I love you? He said, yeah, Daddy, I do. I said, okay, go to school. We'll talk about this later. And he got out and went to school, and I felt a greater degree of peace, knowing that we had work yet to do, but confident that he knew I loved him. It was difficult. Lurches and stalls, fits and starts, far from perfect, but it was a lesson I was learning, empathy. To be able to say to our children, son, I love you with all my heart. Daughter, I cherish you profoundly. I love you enough that I want to enter into your experience. I want to understand it. I want to try to understand it from your perspective, in your world, with your friends, through your experiences, through your choices, both good and bad. I want you to know that I love you, and I want to understand that. See, most kids know their parents love them. Most parents love their kids. However, empathy is that vehicle that allows the child to feel loved. They may know the love up here, but when we enter empathetically into their lives, then they feel that love. Character is best built on a foundation that is deep and solid and strong in love. It is saturated and immersed in love. It is upon that foundation that children can then begin to build an edifice made of character. So what's our lesson? Mixing those two words together with the proverb of Solomon. Start children off and help them to grow at the place where love sustains them and where reality confronts them. And one day, they will be people of character. Because empathy is not enough. Empathy, reality. You know what the temptations we parents have is, don't you? The temptation that is so appealing and so strong as to veer off to one side or veer off to the other side. Seek to have a relationship with our kids that is only based on empathy. We're just friends. The truth is, we're parents. Or veer off to the other side and hold the standards so high and the expectations are so strong and reality is so clear that they feel I can never attain that. It's overwhelming. It's unreachable. And they become deeply discouraged. The key is to maintain the balance, to keep the tension between those two, between empathy and reality. So what is reality? Empathy is seeing something from your perspective. What is reality? Reality is the truth about life, the truth about the world, the truth about how life works, the truth about how one has to conduct oneself to live in a society, in a social community, the truth about God and His expectations. Reality is simply the truth about how things work. That's reality. Our kids need reality as well. It's tempting to veer off one way, tempting to veer off the other way. What we seek is a balance. Now, in the New Testament, have you noticed how John, the gospel writer, writes about Jesus in His incarnation? He describes Jesus becoming human, wrapped in human flesh, and revealing to us the glory of the Father. You know what he says about it? He says, Jesus was full of grace and truth. Full of grace, that's empathy. Full of truth, that's reality. It's the whole reality of the gospel. It's expounded upon by the letter writer to the Hebrews, who says Jesus can sympathize with us, He can empathize with us because He was one of us. He was tempted in every way like we are. That's empathy. I understand. Yet without sin. That's reality, the reality that God desires of us to grow, to become mature. That's the truth. It's the shape, it's the form of the Christian gospel. But we face temptations, we parents. You know what the temptations are. I know what the temptations are. I've failed many times at these temptations. I don't know that I'm alone. Your 17-year-old gets a speeding ticket. You want to be empathetic. You say, I'm so sorry, I've had those. That's no fun. But then the temptation is to pay it for him. Your 9-year-old doesn't finish her homework, and yet, I want to go out and play, and you make the decision to allow her to go anyway. Your 15-year-old has borrowed money from some friends, doesn't have any to pay it back, now wants you to bail them out. The question is, what is reality? How does the world work? What will most prepare them to face the world as an independent, self-sufficient, healthy adult? Does the world work in those ways? When he's 35, will somebody pay a speeding ticket for him? When she's in college, does it matter or not whether the homework gets done? When they're trying to be responsible adults, will somebody bail them out of what they owe? You're a parent, not the government. Remember that. What is reality? What will most help them? A man named Harold Wilkie tells a story about when he was a child. It's interesting, Wilkie would remember this years later. Must have had an impact on him. Wasn't that old. He was in his room trying to put on a shirt, some kind of shirt. I don't know, pullover, sweater, some kind of shirt like that. He was having a hard time getting it on, negotiating, getting it on. His mother was standing at the door with a friend of hers. And he was wrestling and pulling, and it was all twisted around. He was trying to get it straight and get it on. He was really learning to do that and learning to do it well. And his mom was standing there watching him. Finally, he said her friend spoke to his mother in a rather sharp tone and said to her, "Ida, help that child." To which he said, "My mother responded, I am helping him." Reality. It's so tempting to step in and shield them from some of the harsher realities of life. Now, you understand, this has to be age appropriate as they grow. It's a growing process. But we haven't always done that real well. In fact, I want to tell you a story. But before I tell you the story, I want to tell you some of you are going to love this story. And some of you are going to hate this story. I don't think very many of you are going to feel ambivalent about this story. With that preamble in place, the story. I heard Henry Cloud tell it at a seminar he gave. He was on a flight, had met a man sitting next to him on the plane. They fell into conversation, and the man told Cloud the story of a company. Cloud says, you would know the name if I were to mention it. Multi-million-dollar company. This man had started the company, had built it from the ground up. It was doing extremely well. He was now nearing retirement age. His son, who worked for the company as well, was coming along behind him. He was trying to mentor him to the place where he could hand the company off to him. But there were problems in paradise. Problem was that his son didn't have the same character the father did. The father prided himself on the fact that not only had he built a company that was financially not just solvent, but was making good money, but he had built a company that was built on an ethic of respect for each other. The employees loved coming to work. Management respected them, listened to them. They engaged with each other. He was respectful to those who worked for him. He prided himself. That's the ethos, the character of our company. And his son was not continuing that. You tried all kinds of ways to get him help. Professional coaching, personal counseling, his own conversations with him, confrontations at times. But his son had come to develop an attitude that said, no. I have to do it my way. The father was distressed. One day on the factory floor, he came around a corner, walking through the factory, almost ran into his son, who was standing there publicly berating an employee in front of other people, demeaning him, humiliating him. The father took in the scene at one glance, saw what was happening, caught the son's eye and said, to the office. They went to the office. The father sat down, looked the son in the eye and said, I wear two hats in this company. I wear the hat of boss, and with you, I wear the hat of father. Right now, I'm going to put on my boss hat. He looked at him and he said, you're fired. Clean out your office. You're through. I have tried every way I know to train you in a different direction, and you will have none of it. I will not have the company that I have spent my life building, not just in terms of its success, but in terms of the ways we treat our employees. I will not have that damaged by somebody who doesn't care. So I'm very sorry, but you're fired. And then he said, now let me put my dad hat on for a minute. He looked at his son and said, son, I heard you lost your job. Is there something I can help? Is there something I can do? You may love it. You may hate it. But there is something in that for wise parents. Because if we combine those concepts with Solomon's proverb, the lesson of character says, start your children off where love sustains them and reality confronts them. And one day, they will be people of character. Is it worth it? Is it really worth it? It is so hard to do that. I can tell you as a parent, and Anita would join me in saying the very same thing, I can tell you as a parent, seeking to maintain that balance is an eternal challenge. To maintain it in the right ways, in the wise ways, in the loving ways, between empathy and reality. The question is it worth it? Another story as response comes from a pastor named Ron Lee Davis. Pastor Davis, some years ago, pastored up in the Bay Area of our state. Became acquainted with a family in that community, a beautiful family, had a son named David. David was just a delightful young man as he grew up. He listened to much of what his father said. His father, his mother were very involved in his life. They must have understood some of these kinds of concepts because he grew up loving and walking with Jesus. As he came to years, he felt he had the call of God on his life to go into ministry. So he responded to that call, went to seminary, came out and was pastoring a church, was doing very well. Young man named David. And then at 32 years of age, this young man, 6 feet 2 inches tall, 200 pounds, apparently the picture of health, was stricken with cancer. A very deadly, damaging kind of cancer. You know the story. The days, the weeks, few months of intensive treatment, how the treatment affected him, how the cancer was eating away at him. Do you realize that 6'2", 200-pound young man became so emaciated that his weight dropped to a mere 80 pounds? I want to read you the words of Pastor Davis as he describes what happened. When he was about to pass from this life into eternity, David asked his father to come to his hospital room. Lying there in the bed, he looked up and said, "Dad, do you remember when I was a little boy, how you used to just hold me in your arms close to your chest?" David's father nodded. Then David said, "Do you think, Dad, you could do that one more time? One last time?" Again, his father nodded. He bent down to pick up his 32-year-old, 6'2", 80-pound son and held him close to his chest. So the son's face was right next to the father's. They were eyeball to eyeball. Tears were streaming down both faces. And the son said to the father, "Thank you for building the kind of character into my life that can enable me to face even a moment like this. Is it worth it? Building the kind of character into my life." So what does it mean? Well, I think it means this. If we want to raise children into adults of character, we have to remember the lesson. Start your children off, whether it's at 3 or at 18, moving into their adult life. Start your children off in the place where love sustains them and reality confronts them. And one day, they will be people of character. Which means, parent, love your child. Love them with every fiber of your being. Love them with all that you are. Love them in the good times and the bad. Love them when they succeed and when they fail. Love them with every way that God has placed love in your life. Send that out to them. Love them with all your heart. Love them with empathy so that they feel it. And then tether them to reality. Let reality be clear. Don't protect them from the realities of life. Don't step into the way of every consequence that comes. Let them understand reality as it is. And if you do that, it just could be that one day, at an unsuspecting moment, your child will say something, will do something that will bring a lump to your throat and tears to your eyes and a prayer to your heart as you say, "Thank you, God. Thank you. My child has become a person of character." Gracious God, it's the way you treat us. Justice and mercy, grace and truth, empathy, and reality. We have freely received, let us freely give. And let us especially pour both into our children. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.